Yeah, Homer led the league in tackles with 85. The deep ball for Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Bryson Allen. And Allen weaving his way all the way down to the 22.
10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, dancing all around. Throw it as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver, you're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
All right, we're back with another episode of CFL Summer Showcase Northern Lights. I'm joined by my always trusty co-host, Michael Washington. How you doing this morning, sir?
Doing wonderful, man. Sunday morning, we're here and ready to talk some football. Some 12-man football at that.
Yes, sir. I can't believe the preseason's already over. It doesn't seem like it's been 3 weeks since the season started. Man, it's flew by.
Crazy, man. Crazy, man. Absolutely nuts. But that's what this time of year does. You know, you get all the leagues going all at once. The next thing you know, you have they fly. You know, Thursday games, Friday games, Saturday games, Monday games, and next thing you know, it starts all over again.
Isn't that the truth? Especially lately, man. Got the TAL going on, the AF1, the NAL, the IFL, the LFA, CFL just finished preseason. UFL's finishing up their regular season. It's been ridiculously busy trying to keep up with all these different leagues. So hopefully, well, I mean, not hopefully, pretty soon here it's going to start slowing down a little bit, and then, you know, I'll be missing all this. So
it's always that time of year. You feel like you don't have enough time, right?
Yep, exactly. And then by the time it passes, you're like, man, kind of wish it still had 14 games to watch tonight. Anyway, I mean, let's just kind of overall general overarching feelings on the playoffs preseason so far.
I mean, you know, it's a typical preseason. In my opinion, you know, you look at it from a standpoint, you see a lot of guys on the field that you don't normally you're going to see in CFL games, especially during the regular season. But it also gives you a glimpse of some of the other guys that are going to make an impact during the regular season that have to get a chance to play. You know, Calgary's Damian Alford is a guy that comes to mind. You know, he had a pretty solid preseason. You know, I think they only played 3 games, so it's not like it's like a huge sample size, but it's enough to get a glimpse of what you have going on in there. And it kind of showcases a little bit of some of the how the makeup of the teams are going to look as far as overall, what's the word I'm looking for? Overall fit, I guess, or environment, the kind of environment they're going to bring to the table. So yeah, I mean, you know, I think it was just a typical preseason. There wasn't really anything that stood out, and you always have to be wary of preseason, you know, superstars, because you never know what that really translates to in the regular season. But I thought it was a good one. It was competitive, and yeah, I'm excited for the CFL season to start now, basically.
As am I. I mean, man, you're obviously a Calgary fan. We've talked about this a lot, and you have to be excited if you're a Calgary fan. They ended up finishing the preseason with the most points scored. And they did only play 2 games, 56 points, if I remember correctly, maybe 57. Let me double check that. 57, I apologize. 57 points scored in 2 games. So, I mean, obviously, pretty impressive showing by their offense, which had a lot of turnover this offseason. You know, that was one of those things that I wanted to kind of see how that unfolded, and I'm actually really excited. You know, cheap plug, but if you didn't check it out, we have an article up on the website right now about Quincy Vaughn, the very intriguing player that Calgary drafted this season, and his role with the offense. So definitely go check that out. But yeah, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that. I mean, like I said, 57 points in 2 games. That's nothing to sneeze at, especially when half your offense is, brand new players.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is, Calgary last year, um, they signed PJ Walker before the end of the year. It was like 2 games left. They were out of the playoffs at that point, so they wanted to get PJ Walker in there to compete or be on the roster. And then they traded for Vernon Adams Jr. And anytime you trade for Vernon Adams, you're definitely trying to make a commitment towards turning the offense around. I mean, Calgary's biggest problem last year was sustaining drives and getting deep into the opponent's territory. So their ability to be able to push the ball down the field is going to be, and then they spent the first round pick on Damian Alford, so they definitely were trying to do what they can to make sure that this offense was going to keep up with what the defense is capable of. I'm always weary with bringing in a lot of turnover, though, and how it's going to mesh once the regular season does start. I mean, the offensive explosion, the output looks great in the preseason, but again, it's preseason, so it is a different season than the regular season. So we'll see what happens, but it definitely gives us hope as Calgary fans, to not repeat, what was it, a 4-win season last year, and having the first overall pick. So definitely impressed so far with what they have done. It's just let's see what the final product looks like, in week 1. That's essentially what I have to say.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously this is still preseason. It's not necessarily about the record per se, but another fact that came up about Calgary, I'm just kind of looking back at the stats and kind of jogged my memory, but they actually produced quite a bit of pressure this past game against Edmonton. And not that necessarily Edmonton has the best offensive line in the world, obviously, but at the same time, 5 sacks, several tackles for a loss, had an interception, a fumble recovery. Sorry, not an interception, a fumble recovery. So, I mean, they had some solid plays on defense as well. And, I mean, again, this is preseason, so don't get too hyped up about it. But at the same time, like, there's a lot to like about Calgary right now. As moving forward into the season.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things is you got to make sure that, especially as fans, me being a Washington fan, I've had the luxury of being overhyped for seasons and then having it be extremely disappointing. And then I've had the other side of it too, where you're not really thrilled for a season, or you're just kind of like, we're going to be the same old Washington team. And then they surprise you and do what they did last year. So it's the same thing with Calgary. You kind of have to take that approach. You kind of have to take the, excited with caution though type of situation, optimistically cautious, as I like to say, like when I was talking about the AFL and AF1 last year, optimistically cautious. And that's kind of really what I am. I hope we have the pieces in place that we can compete. But at the same time, if we end up going out there and only winning 7 games, I wouldn't be surprised by that either, just because that's just the way it works for my teams. So I think fans should be excited, and I think that, we are excited. It's just, let's temper our expectations. It's not going to be I don't think it's going to be a Grey Cup run, but who knows? These leagues are always designed to be on short contracts and turnover, so anything can really happen with them. And when you have Vernon Adams, if he stays healthy, leading the charge, even in this case, even if he doesn't stay healthy, you got PJ Walker behind him. So, I mean, you have 2 guys that are capable of leading. So that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, would completely agree. I mean, honestly, that was one of the reasons why I felt so optimistic about a change in Calgary. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but it must have been frustratingly just so inconsistent with Jake Mayer at the quarterback position the past couple of seasons. So I thought bringing in Vernon Adams and then also, retaining PJ Walker after last season made a lot of sense. You bring in 2 guys that have a lot of starting experience. Granted, Walker is not in the CFL, but he still has the experience. Very quality quarterback, so definitely a guy who can come off the bench for Adams. Obviously, Adams expected to be the starter. So, I mean, I think that's going to be a big factor for their success this upcoming season, obviously. But then also they just kept building around, the new quarterback room, which I really liked. But to kind of transition topics, Did you notice that there's been kind of some issues with CFL CA recently? Whether it was the CFL Plus where they had to transfer over the link to the YouTube. There was a couple games that were on the score tracker that were still showing they were like midway through the third quarter, like hours after the game had ended. And then also right now, there's actually a couple games, if you go look, that show 0-0, and one of them does not have any stats at all. So like when you click on it, it just freezes. So it's kind of weird. I don't remember any of these issues last year, but I've just noticed that there's quite a bit of stuff going on with the website this season. I know that's kind of a goofy topic, but I saw it mentioned on Twitter recently.
I mean, are you talking about the preseason scores or whatever? Because I'm on the site right now, and all of them read with scores for me. So I don't know if maybe it's I don't know if maybe it might be a mobile issue. Maybe they're. I mean, the site itself. You're talking about CFL.ca, right? That's what you're talking about, because because I noticed that it's revamped compared to last year. It looks like it's a little easier to navigate. I don't find it as cluttered as it was last year. So I don't know if maybe it's just that they're going through their preseason. But I'm on the site right now, and everything's working for me, all right from my end. So I don't know if it's like I don't have any. Like I got all the scores from the preseason game: Edmonton, Winnipeg, Montreal, Toronto. They all have scores. Week 2 all has the scores, and week 1 has the Calgary BC game. So
interesting. Right now, mine on the Winnipeg and Saskatchewan game, and BC and Edmonton, they both say 0-0, and it says Friday pregame on both games. And then when you hit the game tracker on the Winnipeg and Saskatchewan one, it'll pull up the actual score and the stats. But if I click on BC and Edmonton, nothing happens. So it's kind of weird how that works.
BC and Edmonton. Let's go take a look. I'll do that right quick just to let you know. Game tracker. BC and Edmonton, 19-20. I get the little football field. Team stats, player stats. Chase Bryce went 8 for 10, 104 yards and a touchdown in that game. That was actually a pretty good game for him.
Had a good game in week 1 as well.
Yeah, I like Chase Bryce. I liked him when he was at Appalachian State too. Cody Fajardo, 6 for 8 for 88 yards. I was actually kind of surprised that he played in that game for 1 interception, and then Trey Ford as well. I mean, it seems to be working okay for me, but I noticed that the CFL Plus had some issues, a couple of the preseason situations, but I usually just chalk that up to them trying something new, or maybe they're trying something different and it just didn't work and they just had an alternative for it. I'm sure that we'll see what happens in week 1 to see if they got it figured out, but when it comes to preseason, I always like to kind of give the benefit of the doubt to the production, or week 1 in the league that doesn't have a preseason, to give the production kind of, a little bit of benefit of the doubt until they can get it figured out. I wish some of the leagues that didn't have a preseason would try to do something earlier to work stuff out, but unfortunately, they don't really ever try to think that far ahead. So
it's something. It seems like it every year. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to harp on the league. It was just something that I wanted to mention this morning. But, I mean, being an indoor football fan kind of changes your perspective on some of these things, because you go through stream issues every year. It's the same leagues, same broadcast companies, all of that, and somehow there's always issues. So in this particular case, this stuff doesn't bother me too much, especially because it's a free service.
Right.
There's a bunch of fans out there that are not too happy with the IFL network recently. So paying $30 and still having the same issues is a bit much. But I did make that point on Twitter as well when I saw the complaints about the issues. Is it's a free service. At the end of the day, you get what you pay for, right? So it's a big platform for the league, but at the same time, you can't expect them to invest a ton of money and effort into it, if it's going to be going out for free. So
I don't know if it's just me, but the IFL has been, as far as the IFL network, not to get off topic, but you mentioned it real quick. I've had 0 issues with mine. I've had no issues with mine on any of the games at all. I've been able to watch most all of them, but when I've been able to watch them without any issues. So,
are you watching them back like after the fact?
Yeah, I watch it. Well, no, I watch them live, and then I watch them. The ones that I catch live, and then I'll watch the ones that I didn't catch. Through the replay service, and I've had zero issues. So I don't know. Just seems to happen with me.
Magic touch or something. I honestly haven't had any issues either, but typically I'm catching games after the fact.
After the fact, yeah.
So I figured I was missing the issues because I was watching the replay. So,
Yeah.
But I had heard some issues on like Quad City streams and stuff like that.
I know the Quad City. I know that there was. I saw on X there was one thing with Quad City that they had a game or two where it was kind of choppy, but they've had some pretty extreme weather in that area, like really extreme weather in that area. So for stuff like that, I generally try to chalk it up a little bit to the weather first if it's had some major issues in the area, because you never know what weather's going to do to electronics. I mean, it's messy.
100%. And then again, off topic, but
off topic, but it kind of it's relevant though. I mean, the CFL.ca is free and whatnot, so I mean, I'm not going to complain too much about it as far as that's concerned. They're probably trying something new, a new technology of some sort, a new upgrade somewhere, and they're probably trying to do something along those lines. And what better to do it than the preseason? You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm not as upset about it. At least they were able to move it over to YouTube, no problem, and it worked out okay. So
yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things that you kind of just deal with as you go. But it's like I said, it's one of those things. It's a free service, so while it's a great service and it's bringing them a lot of exposure, again, you can't expect a ton of money invested, especially because if you notice, there's not really commercials. They just promote the CFL while it's on. So that's probably part of the thing. There isn't a bunch of income coming from that either.
Well, I mean, for the CFL.ca, I think a lot of that is just for the international audiences, the American audiences, more than it is for Canada itself, because I think they have that deal with TSN up in Canada. So, which I think is partially owned by ESPN. So, I mean, they have a little bit of a media influx, at least coming in their own country. It's just, I know that they want to broadcast internationally, and unfortunately, CBS for some reason didn't work out for them. So they went with the CFL Plus side of things, and I was hoping the CBS would pick them up with some of the things that they show, but they didn't. So a little unfortunate.
Completely agree. So one of the moves that happened shortly after we did our CFL draft recap was Jarrett Dagey signed with the Toronto Argonauts, and I kind of wanted to ask you how you felt about his performance. I mean, he came in there late to Toronto, and then this past weekend he played pretty damn well. 8 of 13 for 93 yards. He ran 6 times for 39 yards and a touchdown. And I don't know if you saw that touchdown that he rushed for, but it was a pretty shifty little move by him.
Jarrett's always been a little of a I don't want to say underrated athleticism, but he's had some athleticism in his entire career. I think the thing with Toronto when making this move is it's just good to bring in a guy with experience who had, mild success. I mean, let's face it, when he was with Edmonton, it didn't turn out that well, but Edmonton was kind of a little bit of a hot mess at the time. They weren't the most talented team across the board. They really struggled when he was up there to get the offensive line figured out. I feel like that's been an ongoing theme for Edmonton forever now. So for Toronto to bring him in, it's good. And maybe Dagey just needed a more solid and stable franchise around him to be able to perform. Now, again, this is a preseason, so it's like you kind of want to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because, you're facing the second, third, fourth stringers that are trying to battle for position on the roster in some capacity. But I think it's just good to bring in a guy who can plug and play if your quarterback gets hurt. And let's face it, the CFL has, the NFL problem where a lot of quarterbacks get hurt and, for various different reasons. And you just never know when you're going to get a guy to start. So it's good to have that safety net with a guy like Dagey to come in and, in case, Chad Kelly doesn't work out or gets hurt again or whatever it may be, to have that. So impressive. for being a late start to the a late signing in comparison to some of the others, but a good one, for a team that might be looking for that third quarterback to have as a safety net.
Speaking of that third quarterback situation, I think Tucker Horn has done quite the job of trying to cement himself as a quarterback there. I mean, this past game, 16 of 21, 172 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. He only ran once for 2 yards in this game. The past one, I think he was 10 of 17 for a little over 100 yards as well. He got a lot of playing time, which I thought was important to kind of point out. But then also on top of that, he seemed to get a lot more trust than some of the other quarterbacks. I mean, Cameron Dukes only threw 6 passing attempts, did not show up in the one of the other games. I believe the second game of the season so far. I don't think he played at all. Instead, Daggy played. So I think we might have an idea what what's going to happen there at the quarterback position. Sorry, Cameron Dukes did play in both games. It was Arbuckle that didn't play in this last game.
Yeah.
But regardless, Dukes only took 17 passing attempts this entire preseason, had 8 completions. So, I mean, he might be on the outside looking in there. I mean, he didn't do much of anything that was exciting or really like kind of set him apart from the other quarterbacks. I mean, he does have a lot of starting experience there. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do at quarterback for sure, because I think that whoever gets cut there is going to be somebody who's sought after by other teams moving forward.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things with a guy like Nick Arbuckle is, like you said, he was very much, has the experience, and it may have just been a thing where he just has the experience, so they didn't want to use him per se. They didn't want their backup quarterback getting hurt or something along those lines. I'm curious about how they're going to handle this, though. Looking at their roster, I haven't seen their cuts yet. I've been kind of trying to pay attention as much as possible to some of their cuts. It doesn't look like the website's updated just yet on that, but I'm very curious as to what they're going to do, because Dukes was there last year and was able to play and perform at a decent level. They brought in Daggy, who obviously got a ton of playing time. Tucker Horn's had a great preseason. They're all very similar in size. Horn might be a little bit lighter than the other ones, but I'm very curious as how many they're going to carry here, because judging from what we've seen with that, it may be a system thing. Like, it doesn't matter what quarterback comes in there and is able to plug and play essentially and be somewhat successful. But they have 5 quarterbacks on roster right now. I know that they're probably not going to keep 5, but I'm very curious of whether or not they keep 4. I think 4 might be very well possible, and if they keep 4, and Arbuckle didn't play this preseason because they were protecting him, unfortunately, I think it might be Dukes that could be on the out.
I'm kind of leaning in that direction as well. I think there's a very real possibility that we see Daggy end up sticking, just based on how he played this past game. I mean, I could be wrong. He might be a cut because he came in late, and maybe they stick with who they know better. But it'll be interesting to see how things work out on that one. I'm not finding anything on their cuts yet. I know a couple teams, they had kind of started announcing cuts, and same thing. The website's not updated, so I can't even tell you right off the top of my head who.
It looks like Saskatchewan, Ottawa, Montreal are the only 3 teams that have announced their cuts yet. It looks like everybody else really hasn't yet. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm looking at the tracker right now. It looks like Ottawa, Maurice for French, a couple guys, Darius Simmons, type of things, but they don't have the other teams yet. Like BC hasn't got it. Winnipeg, Calgary, Hamilton, Edmonton, and Toronto haven't had any announced yet. So I don't know when the deadline is, but I imagine it's coming right up.
I think it's literally like noon today, if I'm not mistaken.
So then we'll probably have an influx of things coming in today. Then so that'll be interesting to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. There is one cut that I saw for Calgary that I wanted to get your reaction on. I might have only seen this because I was close to the situation, but Cam Eccles-Looper has been released by Calgary after a pretty solid rookie season in the CFL, or first season with Calgary anyway. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know you guys brought in quite a few receivers, but I still thought that was kind of interesting to see him get let go.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I'm never a big fan of releasing productive veterans that have been a stable point for your roster. I'm not usually a big fan of that. But if you honestly are thinking of or taking a look at it from a standpoint of the receiver position in Calgary, like you said, they brought in a whole slew of receivers. Alfred's there, Clark Barnes, Reggie Bagleton, some of these younger guys, Joseph Nagata, Jalen Philpott, Dominique Rhymes, those guys are all there. Not sure what the rest of the room is going to look like. But I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the same time, Eccles hasn't been a guy that's necessarily carried the wide receiving room in the sense of the way that I think that most teams would like to see. I think he's a very good like role player type piece in a wide receiver room, but he's not a main focal point, which is weird because he has the size and talent to do it. But once Dominique Rhymes was there and they kind of spent their first round pick on him, I felt like there was a possibility with contract purposes that he may become expendable, depending on how they work the salary cap up there. So he'll latch on somewhere, though. I don't think it will be very long before he finds a home, especially up there in the CFL, because he does provide an immediate impact in some capacity to a wide receiver room, especially one that might be a little bit thinner than what Calgary has.
That's certainly fair. I mean, I didn't know that he wasn't necessarily a one of their top targets by any stretch. He was pretty productive when he got the opportunity to play last season, and I thought it was just kind of surprising. Like I said, obviously they've made a ton of moves there at wide receiver, and it made a lot of sense for them to ultimately cut a guy like Cam that's not necessarily entrenched. He's also more of a veteran, so it's one of those things that it just was a little bit surprising. But on the subject of cuts, there was a guy who got cut from Montreal that you wanted to talk about that is kind of a surprise cut as well.
Yeah, this cut is really probably the most surprising one to me so far out of the ones that have been made, and that's Walter Fletcher. It was cut in a kind of a surprising move when you talk about this running back room. That leaves them with Stevie Scott, who has good size. Travis Theus, who a lot of people think is the reason why Fletcher got cut, and then Sean Thomas Erlington are the only three running backs on the roster currently at this moment in time. The reason that that's surprising, I think, to a lot of people, or to me and a lot of other people, is you have a pretty unproven running back room, and you're one of the better teams in the league. Thomas Erlington is kind of been around a little bit. I think he was with Hamilton the last time I knew. Didn't really ever become a top, player in this league. Not sure if he ever is going to become a top player in this league. He has a tendency to kind of be more of like a fullback, role player run at the running back position than he does anything else. So Theus and Scott are a little unproven. Scott's been around a little bit, but he isn't a guy that's ever really stood out. So Fletcher was the most proven in this position, and he was the most reliable running back, I want to say, in that room. So to see him go, it's a little surprising. They must have really liked what they saw with Theus. Theus must have been doing something that was really, really special in that backfield. And it's going to be an interesting development to keep an eye on for a team that I think a lot of people are expecting to compete for a Grey Cup again, because they kept 4 quarterbacks. So you have to start wondering about roster construction when you start thinking about that. So we'll see. we'll see. I mean, Thea's had a good preseason. A lot of people like him around there. Everything that I've been reading, there's a lot of love for him around that Montreal team. But it's definitely one of the more baffling cuts to me, at least. We'll see what happens, but they know better than me. That's why they're employed and I'm not, I guess. But it just seems strange to have your most reliable back and your staple really of that room. You kind of take that staple out of the packet and hope the new staple holds, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice because like you just mentioned, first of all, he was one of the more reliable players that they had on the roster, but then also they just paid him $175,000 bonus. So for that to go through and then for them to turn around and cut him, only months later, it'll be interesting to follow this move in particular. But I did like what I saw from Thies. Hopefully I pronounced that right. He is extremely valuable in the return game, and I think that's probably a big reason why we see him stick there. Will he develop a role on offense going forward? Probably. But at first, I think he's got a lot more immediate value than a lot of the veteran backs that might have been on the roster and guys that they ultimately decided to keep for their offensive prowess. But he's definitely going to be a factor one way or another. I know there were a couple explosive punt returns in week 1, and it looked like he did similar things in week 2. I honestly need to go back and finish watching that game. Realistically, special teams will get your foot in the door. It's a matter of what you do on offense that makes you a starter realistically. But wasn't too blown away with anything he did on offense. But it seemed like every time he got the ball in space on the punt return or kick return game, he was doing something special.
I mean, mainly looking at the roster, they kept a lot of wide receivers, so I'm expecting this is probably going to end up being a fairly wide open, like a spread, air raid style type system. And maybe that's what they prioritized, was that extra spot at the wide receiver position over him. Fletcher's not going to be a guy who's going to be a free agent for long. So it's not like it's going to be one of those situations where you're going to be able to bring him back. Because I think another team is going to, once they make their cuts, especially some of these teams that made their cuts a little bit later, might make an extra cut to negotiate bringing him in, because he is reliable and he is a guy who you can put into a system and just leave him alone. Like he'll do his job. So it will be fun to watch, especially today, if the deadline is today, like you said, at noon, to see what happens. But I really honestly don't expect that Fletcher is going to be a free agent for long.
I would agree on that. Somebody's going to pick him up one way or another. It was similar to the Reichwell Armstead situation last year with Ottawa. I feel like he's one of those players that's just too talented and too proven to sit on the market very long. But were there any other surprising cuts to you? I'm going to throw a name out there that probably sounds like I'm a little biased, but Lynn Bowden Jr. I actually thought that he would be a good fit for the CFL style, and maybe he still has that in him, but he was released rather quickly from BC. I thought there was an outside chance that he made at least the practice squad there and eventually made his way onto the roster later on in the season. But do you see another team picking him up, and were you surprised to see him released?
So for Lynn Bowden Jr., one of the things that's been his Achilles heel for his entire career is I guess the biggest thing was the talent is there, but there's always been speculation around his dedication towards learning the game. And that was one of the reasons why he fell and switched positions and did all this stuff when he got drafted into the NFL. And then he couldn't stay healthy. Health has also been one of his biggest issues. He's always banged up or tweaked or whatever it may be. I don't know if that's the case of what's happening in the CFL. I'm not sure. It could be. I feel like that there's something behind the scenes with Lynn that is causing these teams to kind of shy away from him in some capacity. I love Lynn Bowden when he's on the field. I think when he's on the field and he plays, there's really not more of a more talented gadget type player who you can put in, plug and play and get production out of, right? Like you put him on the field and he gets an opportunity, he's probably going to produce. That's usually how that works with him. But he was on some very thin wide receiving rooms in the NFL and couldn't even crack the roster on a special team standpoint. So there's something there. I don't know what it is. I don't want to speculate because it's just things that I've heard, small rumors. None of it's ever been substantiated. So, but it feels like he's way too talented of a guy. Now, hopefully he does end up somewhere. I would hope that there's a team out there that might be able to find a way to use him creatively. It is also possible that he just hasn't adapted to the CFL style. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's played, 11-man football in America his entire life. The CFL game is different. You either can adapt or you can't. It's one of the two. So while surprising, at the same time, it's not necessarily entirely surprising because I've seen it through his career. So hopefully, he signs on somewhere, gets on somewhere, and is able to, prove the doubters wrong. But right now, it just something about it, man. There's something there, and I don't know how to explain it or put my finger on it. It just doesn't feel 100% correct to see him be a free agent again in a league that technically should benefit his play style, in my opinion.
No, I agree, and I think obviously you think about players that are good with the ball in their hands, after the catch and stuff like that. And I think Bowden Jr. is one of those players that fits in, perfectly. He can be kind of that slot back, take some carries here and there, and then serve as a receiver as well. But real quick, transitioning back to Calgary, I just noticed, and I can't believe I didn't catch this earlier this morning, but 3 of their draft picks were transferred to retired. You have both your 7th round picks, offensive lineman Matt Stokman. Then you have defensive lineman Max von Muhldorfer, and then also defensive back Ashton Miller Melancon from the 8th round. All 3 transferred to retired. I thought that was interesting. Interesting to note. I mean, obviously it could be a situation where all 3 of them saw the writing on the wall. Hey, I'm not making the team this year. So maybe I just hang it up early. I mean, that just seems a little weird that 3 of their last 3 draft picks just opted to retire.
I don't know how CFL, does it. I don't know if the retired list could be one of those situations where they take a year off and they allow that to happen and they are able to go to the retired list where it doesn't count against the roster. I don't know. I'm not sure how that's operated up there. I've heard of similar things in the past with other, leagues in the NFL. There's always like a little bit of a loophole type situation where it doesn't count against a roster, thing. And like you said, it's also possible where they were such late round picks that they were just kind of like, yeah, this probably isn't for me. So I'm just going to retire, type of situation. So, who knows? It sucks because you don't ever want to see draft picks retire so early without getting a chance, but it's very possible that may be what it is, or maybe it's Calgary's way of saying, hey, instead of cutting you, we can retain the rights to you, just retire for a year and, maybe we can lure you out of retirement next year and you can come back and try to make the roster or something. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I could definitely see something like that. I mean, I know there's a lot of situations where they'll send them back to school. Maybe that was not an opportunity for these players in particular. I don't know their eligibility right off the top of my head. I apologize anybody who's watching currently, but yeah, I mean, just kind of an interesting note. You see 3 draft pick retires, you kind of have to ask about it. But on another note, I don't know if you saw this, but your Stampeders added a wide receiver from the Potsdam Royals yesterday.
No, I did not see this. I must have missed this. Who did they add?
Tommy Wilson.
Tommy Wilson, nice. Oh, Tommy Wilson, yeah. Little Potsdam Royals, they're one of the better teams in Europe, so he definitely must have impressed for sure. I like Wilson. I don't know what his impact will be. It might be special teams to start off with, but he could easily see maybe see the roster and hopefully get some playing time this year. It'd be nice to see it. I like those transition stories, so it'd be cool to see. It'd be cool to see.
Same here. I was actually surprised that Louis Geyer didn't make a roster or didn't get selected in the draft. He competed in the global the Global Combine, the CFL Combine, and somehow did not get picked up. So I was kind of surprised by that.
He tore it up yesterday for Stuttgart.
Doesn't surprise me.
He had a huge game yesterday for Stuttgart, so I'm surprised he didn't stick somewhere too. So
No doubt. Something tells me Stuttgart is not disappointed by that.
no. The other thing is too, though, is there's also the possibility that because Europe plays 11-man ball, it's another one of those situations where it may have been a little bit tougher for him to pick up the CFL style.
Could be.
It is football at the end of the day, but when you have enough tweaks and nuances and changes, it becomes a different style altogether, and sometimes you just don't adapt to it. Geyer, it's always struck me as more of like I'm going to succeed at like the UFL level in the slot position, type of situation. But I don't know. It's kind of sad to see. I was hoping to see him in the CFL, but I get to see him every week on ELF, so I'm okay with it.
There you go.
Stuttgart's okay with it too, I'm sure.
There you go. Well, I mean, is there anything else from the preseason in particular that you want to touch on? Any more cuts or anything that surprised you?
No, without having the full list of cuts, I think that we're kind of treading water for the most part at this point until we see some more, which we can, bring up next week or, whatever. But yeah, nothing really there for me else other than that. So
definitely. In that note, we're going to hit a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back with our preseason power rankings to kind of round this out. Let us know what you guys think about doing these Sunday mornings. Last year, I think we were doing them Wednesday nights. Kind of got a preview, review situation going on. This year, I think we're going to transition a little bit, focus on some transactions, some news, some injury stuff like that. Maybe some fantasy football. We'll see how things go. But yeah, real quick, hit a commercial, come right back, and wrap this bad boy up pretty quickly. As soon as I find the commercial.
As soon as you can find the commercial to play it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right. Definitely check out Upside, a proud sponsor of this program. And then we also have one more current, our official banking app for Shady Sports Network. So check that out as well. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and transition over, talk about our preseason power rankings real quick. And I'm going to let you kick this one off with your list, which is on the left on here.
Yeah, I mean, basically, when you take a look at this team across the board, Toronto obviously being number one, I feel like it should be the staple across the board for the most part. I really enjoy this team. I think it's just been the most stable franchise outside of possibly Winnipeg for the most part. For the last few years, they are healthy. They're well coached. I think that's one of the biggest things that is good for Toronto, and they're experienced. When you have experience and you have a way to continue to win and be a winning franchise and be a Grey Cup contender every year, you should be near the top of this list, whether you're first or second in this situation. I have Montreal too, because they've also the last few years been one of the more stronger teams. I don't think that there's too much of a change. The Walter Fletcher situation is going to be a question mark. I think it's going to be when you take a look at the run game, is it going to be as effective as it's been in the past? It kind of sets up a lot, but they have a ton of wide receivers. So I think that they're going to try to play more of a run and shoot style, or, that West Coast style. I mean, a spread offense type of style game. So maybe the run game will be set up through the passing game, and Walter Fletcher won't be missed as much. Still, like the quarterback situation, again, this is a franchise that won a Grey Cup recently. So they have experience with championship runs. And basically, those are the top two teams that I feel like you have to have near the top in some capacity, at least in the top three like you do, because it's been the staple. The foundation's there, and really realistically, these top three are all interchangeable. Winnipeg at 3, that's by a slight margin. Winnipeg is another team that, even with the slow starts like they had last year, still found a way to came on towards the end of the year and were legitimate Grey Cup contenders by the end of the year. So, Winnipeg is another team. You have the talent, you have a well-coached situation, you have a situation, a defense that, just gets better as the year goes on. They've generated a lot of, pass rushing in basic fronts, which is something that a lot of other teams can't do. They have to get a little more creative. Winnipeg is able to go out there and even in their base defense is able to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. I don't expect that to change. So those 3 teams are going to be the teams that everybody else is going to be chasing. If I'm going to put a tier on them, that's going to be my tier 1. It's going to be those top 3 teams across the board. Number 4 for me is Saskatchewan. I think last year, Corey Mace, we saw a defense that really surprised a lot of people. The offense was a little bit, slacking as much. But I think Saskatchewan is still in a position where they have a tendency, if they can get that offense just to take the next step, which is definitely a possibility with this team, that they can work their way into being a contender this year. Ottawa, I'm surprised you have Ottawa as down as you do, but I have Ottawa next. I think Ottawa is one of those interesting teams that, if I had to put a tier on it, they would probably be my tier 3. Saskatchewan would probably be in a tier by themselves at 2. Ottawa would be kind of like that gap, like they could tease to be a lower tier 2 team. Injuries obviously are going to play a big factor. Seeing how this team works around everything, I guess with the cuts that are going to be taking place and who they bring in, what's going to happen at the quarterback position is always important for anything in the CFL. I think Ottawa's okay with that. They signed some big free agents last year. We talked about it on one of the shows last year. I think this team will be okay. It's just going to be interesting to see if they take that next step, because they kind of hovered last year, and that mid-tier never really put a lot of pressure on some of the top teams. Had some good games where they looked like they were going to, but never really, finished with it. BC, Calgary, my next 2, they're probably in that same tier 3. Calgary just entered tier 3 just because I feel like offensively they did enough. BC, they had some changes this year. We'll see what happens with that team. Defense was a problem last year. I don't know if they did enough to necessarily address that per se. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that defense and whether or not it matches what I think they can do on offense. And then Hamilton and Edmonton, I don't know, man. I'm not excited about any of the moves they made. Cody Fajardo, I love as a player. I just think Edmonton needs to stop just dicking around and just honestly hand the reins over to Trey Ford and let it go. Like, I think it's time to see what you have with him. It's been years now. Fans have been calling for it. You don't have a fan base that's excited for. There's nothing for that fan base to be excited for. Edmonton's been bottom dwellers for the last few years. I don't know if it's going to get better. And Hamilton really struggled last year. Swiss cheese on defense, and then offense just was sputtered along. They had some good games, and luckily for them, didn't finish dead last. But I don't think that there was really a ton of moves that they made that really excite me at all. So, I don't know, man. That's just my list. How I feel about the teams heading in. Obviously, again, I said it earlier on the show. CFL is a year-to-year league for the most part because the contracts are so short. So, who the hell knows? So. That's my power rankings heading into the regular season, though.
That's fair. I mean, obviously, you can tell mine aren't too much different. I do have Winnipeg above Montreal. I just think Montreal might have taken a step back after the past couple seasons. In particular, I was not a huge fan of what they did this offseason. So, I'll be curious to see exactly how everything shakes out with them. I am excited about Davis Alexander, although he is a younger quarterback, turning over the reins to anybody who's not as experienced as a starter. You're always going to have questions about how they're going to perform, at least, up front. I know he got some starts last season, but this is a different ballgame now. You're quarterback 1, so they gave you the contract. It's time for you to prove that you belong. If he does, I could definitely see Montreal taking a climb back up to the second or maybe even the top spot, depending on how he performs. But, I mean, you got Winnipeg and Toronto, both who have veteran starting quarterbacks returning, in Caleros and Chad Kelly, and I just had a hard time putting Montreal any higher than that. Calgary, I spoke on it earlier. I'm really excited about their offense. Their defense seems to be solid, and really, it's just you bring in a guy like Vernon Adams, and you immediately make yourself a playoff contender. And I think that they hedged their bets when they brought in or retained PJ Walker, because Vernon Adams has a long injury history, so you kind of protect yourself for the inevitable games that he's going to miss due to injury at some point. So you bring in Calgary, as that number 4 team on my list. Saskatchewan, I like a lot of what they did. I am not super thrilled that they're continuing to go forward with Trevor Harris. I think it's time for them to figure out a different solution at quarterback. I just think Harris is getting on that back half of his career. I think it's time to have something in mind there. They brought in Tommy Stevens. They brought in Jake Mayer, but I believe they already cut him, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously there's a plan there. I just don't see it currently. So, they probably could have been that number 4 team for me as well. It's just another situation where I like Calgary's quarterback room better than I like Saskatchewan's right now. BC is probably slated to be the highest climber once the season begins, because I believe Nathan Rourke will be better than he was last year.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet enough to feel confident to put them higher yet, but I fully anticipate that they will eventually be in that second tier of teams, probably 4 or 5, maybe even higher, as high as 2 or 3, depending on how things go this season. It's just they're such a toss-up. They go as Nathan Rourke goes. So we'll see how things go this season for him. And then I've got Ottawa at 7 because I was not thrilled with Drew Brown's play in week 2. And then we barely even saw him in week 3. I think
Right.
we saw one drive and didn't even throw a pass. So in that mind, or in that thought process, I'm concerned about his inaccuracies and his ball placement in week 1, because there was a couple times where he threw a ball and either led his receiver right into coverage or threw it to coverage, and the receiver had to go and actually play some defense and bat it out of the defender's hands. And you just can't have that. That's your big money quarterback. And, honestly, we don't have anybody behind him realistically that I would feel comfortable coming in and starting. Matthew Schultz, lots of experience, quality quarterback. I definitely feel a lot better with him as the quarterback 2 than the quarterback 1. So in that position, I'm just not sold on Ottawa yet. I do ultimately think they'll probably be a playoff team, but it's going to be probably by the skin of their teeth again this season. So it'll be interesting to watch and see exactly how that unfolds for them. I have my bottom 2 teams exactly the same as yours, and I'm harping on quarterbacks a lot right now, but it's realistically the one position that can make or break your team. And in Hamilton, not real convinced that they have a guy that can lead them and be a quality team. I know that they've got a veteran starter and he's been solid and everything, but at the same time, I just don't know that there's enough around him for him to elevate Hamilton to a playoff level.
Yeah, that was my issue with Hamilton, is I just don't know if there's enough around Bo Levi to make it, to make it sustainable for him.
Exactly. And I mean, don't get me wrong, he played his ass off last year, but he was also a liability at times too, through some interceptions that ended some drives and that should have resulted in points and stuff like that. So I just don't put him in the same tier as a Caleros or even a Trevor Harris for that matter. I think he's kind of a step back in terms of elevating the team while playing efficient and safe enough to protect them from shooting themselves in the foot. So take it for what you will. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people love Bo Levi, but I'm just not one of them.
Yeah. I had Montreal at 2 solely based on the defense. I think they have a little bit stronger of a defense than Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg's a little bit older. I don't think they're as athletic as they used to be, but I still think they're effective enough. But like I said, I mean, I think those top 3 teams are all separated by, you're talking fraction of a percentage point, basically, at that point. So, and that's why I have Saskatchewan ranked as high as I do. I'm not overly excited about Trevor Harris per se, but I think Harris still has enough in the tank that he can just manage that offense. But that defense is really what was the defining point for me on that one.
No, that makes perfect sense. And honestly, I know you were talking tiers a minute ago. I definitely agree about the top 3 teams being in a tier amongst themselves. Though those teams, you could literally put them in any order, and I wouldn't argue with you too much.
Mm-hmm.
The next 4 teams, Calgary, Saskatchewan, BC, Ottawa, I think those teams are in like a singular tier 2 to me, because, again, you could really kind of rotate them anyway, and I wouldn't argue too much with you. And then I think Hamilton and Edmonton are just – they're in a tier amongst themselves where
I wouldn't even call it tier 3. It's like tier 4 in my opinion. Like
that's
I'm not excited about either one of those teams this year, unfortunately.
Well, and see, that's the problem. I am excited about Edmonton, but it's only with the stipulation that they just give Trey Ford the reins and just let him play it out.
Sam, we've been talking about this for 3 years. We've been excited about Edmonton for Trey Ford, and then every year it seems like it's somebody else. So it's just, I until they actually do it, there's just no. Hey, look, good morning, Chris. Miss me in the chat.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, he's got something to say about the CFL strictly because of an indoor football player. But I mean, the thing with Edmonton this year, though, is they paid Ford, right? They paid Trey Ford. So if you're going to do that, you kind of have to give him the reins, right? Like,
why bring in Fajardo?
Yeah.
Why bring in Fajardo then? Like, why bring in Fajardo? I mean, obviously, McLeod Bethel Thompson didn't work out, so like, why bring in Fajardo then if you're just going to give it to Trey and like what's the point of that? I mean, you have an experienced Grey Cup, he won a championship with Grey Cups. Like, he won a Grey Cup championship, if I'm correct, right? Fajardo did, yeah, he did, right?
Yeah.
So like, you bring in a Grey Cup champion, like you're gonna bring him in to sit on the bench? It just doesn't seem right to me. I mean,
that's fair. That's fair for sure. I know they did restructure Fajardo's contract, but I see your point.
It seems like a very backwards move to pay Trey Ford and still bring in a Grey Cup champion. You know what I mean? Like, it seems counterproductive to what you're trying to do if Trey Ford's literally going to be the future that you've been talking about for 4 years. You know what I mean? Like, it was essentially like McLeod Bethel Thompson. Like, you brought him in. Yes, he has all this talent and experience, but he was also 38 and played a lot of football for the last few years. So, like, aren't you just kind of counterproducing your team at this point in time? So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I'm just not really excited about Edmonton for that factor. If they gave it to Trey Ford, sure. Like, they might be my biggest mover on the power rankings by the time it's all said and done. But right now, no, I'm not excited about it.
That's actually, I was going to make that same point is, if Trey Ford plays the whole season and he stays healthy and he looks like he has looked in the past at times, Edmonton could definitely be a team that climbs all the way up into a playoff spot. Would not surprise me at all. But that's, like you said, that's been the big stipulation. They don't want to just hand the reins to Ford. And, maybe things are different now. New head coach, completely clean slate. Maybe he gets the benefit of the doubt this season. But something tells me that money that they paid him is going to make the decision a little bit harder to put him on the bench at this point, at least. So
maybe they do a 2-quarterback system. I don't know. We'll see.
God, I hope not.
I know I hate 2-quarterback systems, but hey, whatever.
How do you even do that?
Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not. I don't know how you even do it, but
they're like, okay, Ford, you're in. All right, come out on second down. We'll throw in Fajardo.
There's just never any rhythm when you do that, so it's so hard for me to get behind a 2-quarterback rhythm system. So
completely agree. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap this bad boy up? I mean, there really isn't like a ton of super surprising news to talk about yet in the season, but as Michael mentioned before, we will come back and be talking about cuts and be reviewing week 1 next week. So definitely tune in next Sunday this time, and we will catch you guys then. But what are your final thoughts, Michael?
Primarily my final thoughts are just I'm excited for the season. I think it starts on Thursday, if I'm correct. Uh, you know, so I just want to get it started. Thursday, Ottawa, Saskatchewan starts off with. Did you want to do a quick little prediction on it, or you just want to run with?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go. Ottawa, Saskatchewan. Who you got?
Man, as much as my heart wants to say Ottawa, I think Saskatchewan takes that game.
Yeah, I guess Saskatchewan as well. Toronto, Montreal. That's a good one. That's a great first week 1 matchup right there.
Man, all these games are pretty good.
I'm not going to bother with scores. We'll just do a prediction straight up money line style.
Give me Montreal in that one.
Montreal, okay. I'm going to take Toronto in that one. I think that quarterback is a little more stable, so I think that will edge week 1. If this was like week 7, maybe it'd be a different story. But week 1, Hamilton and Calgary.
Calgary.
Yeah, I got Calgary too in that one. And Edmonton and BC to round it out Saturday, June 7th. So we got games Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week. So Edmonton and BC. Yeah, I got BC as well. So only one game different. Montreal.
Yep. Interesting.
Montreal.
I'll keep an eye on that game. What do you think about this little comment box here?
I like this little comment box thing. I was checking this out. I like it. If you could make it a little bigger, I think. Because I think for some people that have struggled with eyesight, they probably just see blurry lines. So,
yeah, it's not very big, but
I mean, I can read it. But I've been blessed with not so bad eyesight. So
there you go. I'm similar boat.
I ate my carrots as a kid.
It's a new thing that StreamYard came out with. I've been messing around with the past couple days. It's kind of cool. I like how it pulls the comments up as they roll in. Although, today it just showed you that we didn't get a whole lot of comments. So, hopefully you guys.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Definitely. I think it'll be interesting and to see how the audience follows along on Sunday mornings. I think, to be honest, that has a pretty big impact around the indoor football world. I think there just really isn't a whole lot of competition this early in the morning. And so, that might actually benefit us rather than hurt us. So,
well, the 52 counters are highest ever for the show. So,
is it really?
Yes.
No. Hey, thanks, guys.
I think our highest before that was we're catching the East Coast now. When we were doing Wednesday night, we weren't catching the East Coast. Maybe here and there, but it was 10:30 at night. Like the East Coast, for the most part, sleep by then. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, let us know in the comments. Do you enjoy the morning show? What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously Sunday's kind of weird. We're probably going to be missing some games and having to preview them.
I don't think
Sunday games.
Not to cut you off, I don't think that once the season gets into a roll, once we get into the NFL portion of the season, I think all those games are done by Saturday, so it should be okay Sunday morning. It's just going to be half the season. We're going to have to split.
Yeah, looks like the first 3 weeks of the season we're good. We'll hit all the games. Week 4, 5, 6.
They have a stretch through the end of June to September where they just do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday game. So.
Yep. So it looks like
they have
5
Labor
through
Day.
8.
Labor Day is 2 games on Monday, and then after that, I think they're done by Saturday evening.
Yep. Week 13 is kind of a weird schedule. Sunday, Monday.
That's the Labor Day weekend, I think. So they have that Labor Day special that they have every year, but the NFL season starts shortly after that. So it's they try to avoid the NFL season as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this might work out better than I thought because you're right. Most of the season, we do not have Sunday games. So
yep.
Sweet. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I got thinking about it after we talked about moving it and splitting it, but I was like, I think there's only a few. I think it's only like a small chunk of the season, and I think it's through the summer, but that's it.
That's a good point. Yeah. Any other final thoughts?
Nope, that's it. I like the Sunday morning. I think it actually works out a lot better.
I agree.
So,
thank
you,
definitely.
viewers, by the way, for our 53. So,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. While you're here, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps us grow this show, and hopefully next week we hit a new high. Something tells me we will continue to grow this show as we get consistent on Sunday mornings. But definitely appreciate everybody who tuned in. We'll catch you guys next Sunday morning.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer.